So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months.
Hey guys, welcome back to Everyday Finance. In this video, Chamath Palihapitiya discusses Bitcoin and crypto in January, just a few days before the US Securities and Exchange Commission gave its approval. 11-spot Bitcoin exchange traded. In a recent episode of the popular All-In podcast, billionaire investor Chamath Palihapitiya expressed a highly optimistic view on Bitcoin's future in 2024. He made 4 key predictions regarding the impact of new products on the leading cryptocurrency by market cap. According to Chamath, 2024 will be a pivotal year for Bitcoin, as the introduction of Bitcoin ETFs will attract a substantial increase in allocation from institutional investors. This development has long been anticipated by Bitcoin investors. Chamath's second prediction suggested that Bitcoin would regain its status as a mainstream asset, driven by the growing demand through ETFs. The billionaire also foresaw a future where Bitcoin would gain widespread recognition and acceptance, even among those who have been staunchly against it. In this scenario, even the boomers would find it effortless to purchase and hold the cryptocurrency. Chat's ultimate forecast indicated that Bitcoin would be integrated into the conventional financial vocabulary by the conclusion of 2024. The approval of ETFs has surpassed all expectations, even those of Chamath, who initially made these predictions. Recent reports indicate that US spot Bitcoin ETFs currently hold over 855,000 Bitcoin, while global ETFs hold over 1 million. At current prices, this amounts to over $67 billion. In a recent episode of the All-In podcast, Chamath emphasizes the significance of ETFs and the upcoming halving event, predicting a substantial bull run for Bitcoin in the coming months. Chamath notes that in previous cycles, Bitcoin's price remained relatively stable for 3 to 6 months after the halving events. However, after the 6th month, things really heated up and prices skyrocketed. He foresees a similar sequence of events occurring in 2024 and 2025, both in terms of prices and increased adoption. And lots of things Chamath Palihapitiya discusses, so please watch the video to end and share this video, and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance. Thanks.
I thought it would be good to talk about crypto for a couple of reasons. One is because we just had the halving at the end of April.
Did that happen?
The halving is where, just for folks that don't know, the way that Bitcoins are created is by solving these complex mathematical algorithms that take a lot of time and energy and money. And when you solve it, you get rewarded with some number of Bitcoin. And roughly every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. It's called a halving. And this week, I saw somebody who reminded me all of this. And I just want to give this guy a proper shout out. So his name is Wences Casares. And Wences in Silicon Valley, I would say, really was agent zero of Bitcoin. He was the one in 2010 that introduced it to me. I remember he reminded me of the story, actually. We were at Orange Hummus. And he's like, he's Argentinian. He's a Greek. So I'm going to try to copy. He's like, Chamath, you need to buy the Bitcoin. So I heard the story. I fell in love with it. I remember I called my family office. I'm like, buy me 1 million of these things. And he was like, or $1 million worth. And he was like, are you crazy? And I was like, no, this is just a little appetizer. We'll get to the main course. Anyways, he has done a phenomenal job of understanding and proselytizing Bitcoin. And I want to thank him because he really put me onto this. But he mentioned something to me when I saw him a couple of days ago, which is you should really look at the pattern of Bitcoin after a halving. And so I was really curious. And so I had a guy on my team, Quentin, put this together. So Nick, let's go to the first page. So why is this interesting? So here's a little Bitcoin price analysis for you guys. So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months. But then within 6 months to a year and 18 months of these things, there are these crazy price appreciation cycles that happen. So that's what this page shows, which is, 18 months after the first halving, the Bitcoin price returned 45x. After the second halving, it returned almost 28x. And after this third halving, it returned almost an 8x, which is really incredible returns in such a short period of time. If you go to the next page. And so if you graph that, this is what it starts to show, which is what is this price performance after each of these halving cycles. Now, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting because on top of this halving, which theoretically, if history is a guide, we should see some price appreciation. Obviously, the other thing that's happened is we've commercialized Bitcoin. And we talked about this sort of as my big prediction for 2024, which is these ETFs are really going to allow Bitcoin to cross the chasm and have its sort of central key moment, right? And so if you apply the averages, and again, these are just averages, they're by no means predictions. Okay, so I just want to qualify that.
Yeah,
these are
this
just
is not financial advice.
This is not financial advice. These are just guesses.
Data.
Markets were filled with a palpable sense of anticipation as expectations grew for the approval of United States regulators. There has been a significant shift in the market for Ethereum ETF products, which is a positive development. This turnaround comes after just a few weeks, and it has brought renewed optimism for both Bitcoin and altcoins, providing analysis on potential targets, including a $80,000 price for BTC with a very clean priced action on BTC. In his recent analysis, Michael, the founder and CEO of a trading firm, discussed the potential future of X. He anticipates a test at $67,500 before reaching $68,000. The market is eagerly awaiting the approval of an Ethereum ETF, which could further drive the upward trend. A well-known commentator, Bitcoin, has set a target of $80,000 for May, with a possibility of reaching $95,000 in the following month. However, a sharp decline is also expected in June. Despite this, the overall timeline for reaching the local top remains unchanged. In a subsequent discussion, Bitcoin, who accurately predicted Bitcoin's previous all-time highs, has set Q3 of this year as the deadline for a global top. Let's get back to Chamath Palihapitiya interview.
We took these and we applied it to the price of Bitcoin. And if you go to the next page, you start to see what could happen if you just take the average of the last few cycles. So because the first cycle was so extreme, and you start to
so you're just doing cycle 2 and 3 here, to be clear.
Just the averages of cycle 2 and 3. And what you start to see is some really meaningful appreciation. And when I talked to Wences about this, how he explained it, which makes a lot of sense to me, is there are a lot of countries that will never look at Bitcoin credibly, even if they support it. The US may be one of those. But there's an increasing body of countries that will become dual currency. And they will look at their local currency, and then they will look at Bitcoin. And they will say both of these two things are needed. One, when you're transacting on a daily basis for random goods and services. And two, when you need to buy a permanent asset that needs to have residual value, you'll use something like BTC. And I think that's a very powerful concept. And if you look at what this price chart could indicate, is that if this thing starts to get to these levels of appreciation, it is going to completely replace gold and start to become something that has transactional utility for hard assets. And I think if you marry that with this worry that some folks have about dollar debasement, you start to see some really interesting opportunities. So I just thought that this was a interesting thing that he here's our disclaimer, interesting thing that he put me on. I thought I'd share that with you. I'll publish this on Twitter, but that's your crypto corner for the year, folks. No. There's a plausible case where 40 million of those folks show up, because you're talking about a structural part of their wealth creation, right? So, for example, like, President Biden talked about giving people a head start by eliminating their debt. That's a narrow issue. And the reason it's a narrow issue, there's just as many people that don't have debt and just as many people that paid off their debt. And it creates a lot of haves and have-nots, right? And there's all these rules around who will get the debt relief, et cetera. You end up touching 4 or 5 million people maximum. But if there are 50 million people who have now decided to have at least a hedge against the establishment and the traditional financial system, and you are threatening to take that wealth away, I could see how 80% of those folks show up to the ballot box and say, all right, which one of you will just leave me alone? And if the answer is President Trump, then they're all going to vote for President Trump.
Based on Chamath's analysis, it is suggested that Bitcoin has the potential to surpass $500,000 per coin by October in 2025, which is exactly 18 months after, based on the chart. The target implied by the last Hing cycle is 497499. However, the chart indicates that prices could potentially go even higher, with Bitcoin reaching a staggering $1.14 million if the average of cycles 2 and 3 is applied. The chart also shows that Bitcoin experienced a 45.52x increase 18 months after the first Hing, a 27.92x increase after the second, and a 7.8x increase 18 months after the third. Even if this cycle is stunted like the 2021 cycle, experts like Chamath still anticipate Bitcoin prices to rise significantly before the cycle concludes in 2025. Alongside price movements, Chamath is also enthusiastic about the increased adoption of Bitcoin, particularly among institutions, and how it will impact Bitcoin prices. If you learned something from this video, then please like this video and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance, and we will meet in next video. Thanks.